Hello, members of the Modular Building Institute, World of Modular attendees, and all those in Phoenix just for the golf. Today's presentation, titled Permanent Modular Construction Best Practices, is pre-recorded, as I'm unable to be in Phoenix. My name is Ryan Smith, and I'm working and living in Edinburgh, Scotland, during my academic sabbatical until October of this year. I'm at the Center for Offsite Construction and Innovative Structures at Edinburgh Napier University, performing research on offsite process, research and development with offsite companies, and seeing many projects as well. I'm also visiting many grand castles on weekends with my family. Things we like about living in Scotland have to be adorable uniforms our kids wear to school, the relative small geographic scale of the country, and its access to London and Central Europe. Something I do not entirely appreciate about Scotland, however, is the weather. You are all in Phoenix appreciating the weather, I imagine. I grew up in the Valley of the Sun, making the decision not to travel across the pond to present this even more difficult. Enjoy the amazing food and learning about the exciting and evolving modular industry. Having been awarded the Modular Building Fellowship last year, I appreciate being formally adopted into the club and getting to know many of you who I now consider colleagues and friends. My home university in the States is the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. A little under a decade ago, I started studying offsite construction and modular in particular. This led to a professional book aimed at architects and the traditional construction sector to help them come to terms with the underutilized resource in modular construction, specifically as a competitor to traditional on-site stick building. One of the findings in the research from the book was that barriers to adoption and proliferation of permanent modular were social and cultural in nature, and not technical. What I mean is that the reason owners, architects, and contractors were not looking at modular is because there was a lack of knowledge and exposure. In partnership with Tom and Stephen at MBI and many of its members, we embarked on spreading the gospel of modular to cities throughout North America and the globe under the banner Prefab Education. It is an architect and general contractor continuing education course situated as a half-day or full-day workshop. Prefab Education traveled to many locations on the West Coast. In Seattle, accompanied by students from the University of Utah, who in addition to participating with MBI members and local firms in the workshop, were welcomed by Dale Goebel at MSpace, who sponsored a tour of a two-story science school in Washington through the Partners in Education program by MBI. If you have not already, you'll be hearing about Partners in Education that teams schools of architecture, engineering, and construction with MBI members. Thanks to Jeff, Dale, and Nora at MSpace for all their work with our students this last year, and thank you for moving to Park City, Utah. Prefab Education was hosted at AIA San Francisco. An industry panel was part of the workshop consisting of panelists from Zeta Communities, Project Frog, Anderson Architects, and Kendall Young Architects who talked about their design experience in working with Walden Structures. In San Diego, Prefab Education was hosted by the local chapter of the Associated General Contractors and AIA San Diego. Thanks to James Guthrie for setting this venue up. Prefab Education was also taken to the East Coast at World of Modular in Orlando in 2012. Some of you attended that workshop, and this is where I was introduced to the efforts of Whiting Turner and PCL contractors who have developed offsite modular groups within their general contracting company. Offsite is becoming more popular with contractors using multi-trade prefabrication in a warehouse facility near the job site to manufacture mechanical racks, bathroom pods, head walls, and other with their standard subcontractors for projects ranging in type from healthcare facilities to luxury hotels. In Washington, D.C., Prefab Education has presented at the Government Affairs for MBI and has since worked and is currently working with the National Institute of Building Sciences on an emerging council on offsite. This council is serving as an advisory to the central message of this presentation, that of the best practices study on permanent modular. I will get there, I promise. Kudos to MBI for working with NIBS to realize the council and bring together representation from the construction industry, the modular industry, and academia to push the topic of offsite and modular forward. MBI's efforts have put permanent modular on the radar of most of the departments of the U.S. federal government. In Philadelphia with MBI, I chaired a conference and presented prefab education with Lori Roberts from NRB. Having 100+ architecture professors tour NRB factory and participate with MBI members in discussions was a big step in creating cultural bridges between traditional construction and modular. Thank you, NRB. Proceedings for the meeting are due out anytime and will be publicly available online with a link on modular.org. Prefab education workshops have not made it to New York, but I could not pass by here on the map without mentioning the great work MBI has accomplished holding panel discussions at colleges in the city. Clearly related is the news coverage that Permanent Modular has received by virtue of the Atlantic Yards project. When you appear in the New York Times more than once in a year, you're doing something right, MBI. And having a modular company named next to the likes of Ratner, Shop, Arup, and Skanska is a message that Permanent Modular in North America has clearly arrived. In Boston, prefab education was presented in a session at ABX with Chuck Savage from Deluxe. Thanks to Triumph Modular for helping realize this session as well. Prefab education during 2012 has led to talks in the UK and will finish up with a knowledge transfer tour this month in China at Interprefab. The goal of prefab education to inform the traditional construction sector of offsite and modular methods has been famously successful. Thank you again to all those who have supported this effort, and especially to MBI and its members. We've reached literally hundreds of professionals. To the topic at hand, permanent modular construction best practices. While delivering the prefab education and trying to build a social consciousness of modular, it has become apparent that there is much work to do to convince many in the construction industry that modular actually delivers on its promises. Partners in industry, many who are likely in this room watching this presentation, MBI in particular, support this project. The study aims at documenting 18 permanent modular case studies globally, with an emphasis on North America. Other partners are in kind, offering advice and access to data and information. Building on the study by McGraw-Hill on prefabrication and modularization in 2011, Permanent Modular Construction Best Practices seeks to verify and qualify claims of performance. We are saying basically, you cannot improve what you cannot measure. This is really a question of construction productivity of permanent modular, or inputs into the construction process divided by outputs. This can be evaluated for a host of construction interests. Evaluating productivity is not limited to modular projects one to another, however. Rather, this study seeks to compare permanent modular to traditional on-site stick-built construction. What construction performance parameters are we evaluating? This is a fishbone diagram developed from a study of peer-reviewed literature, the McGraw-Hill report, and my own work that illustrates the parameters that contribute to propensity of projects going to modular or not. On the top is what one might call performance parameters or measurable parameters. They include things such as cost, schedule, and scope, and subparameters of things such as labor or overhead under cost. These parameters are being evaluated for each of the 18 case studies and for each of the major stakeholders in any given case study. For example, this would be one case study and a summary of the agreed factors that contributed to the choice for permanent modular. The radar chart on the left represents how the different factors from the fishbone diagram were decision drivers to move to offsite modular at the pre-planning phase of the project, while the one on the right represents a post-occupancy determination of how impactful these factors were by utilization of permanent modular construction. In plain English, what was driving the choice for modular early on, and what ended up actually benefiting by virtue of modular? On the bottom of the fishbone diagram are not performance parameters, but contextual parameters. These are factors that exist to realize successful performance parameters in any given case study. They include parameters such as environmental context of team players' experience, the location of the project, the type of building, from a space demands or a mechanical integration strategy. These also include things such as the organization, contracts, strategies, and tactics used to accomplish the social unity often required in complex offsite projects. These parameters are also mapped for pre-planning phase goals of the project and their actual impact at the end of the project, just as we did with the performance parameters. The idea here is that not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. To uncover what context leads to successful performance of modular versus traditional on-site construction, a number of methods are being looked at currently. One is a simple two-dimensional matrix, somehow considering performance and context collectively. Another, less developed method of evaluation is a three-dimensional diagram that begins to try and understand the interrelationship as a dynamic landscape of opportunities rather than definitive conditions. As you can see, this is in development. The project, Permanent Modular Construction Best Practices, will then take this information and develop a best practices guide with the data outlined and recommendations for project teams looking at modular methods for which to set up their projects, organize their teams, and deploy technologies to reach maximum construction performance with permanent modular. This guide will be disseminated widely on modular.org. In closing, if you are not having motion-inducing nausea from the presentation at this point, thank you for the opportunity to present the background and current project in partnership with MBI and others to realize more productive construction for our collective building future. If you would like to hold a workshop in your region to educate owners, architects, contractors, or if you would like to participate in this permanent modular construction best practices study as an intellectual and/or financial supporter, please contact me at resconsulting@me.com, or you can find me at prefabeducation.com. You can also scan this code with your smartphone and find the website. MBI staff members will also be able to get you in touch with the study. Thank you so much for your time.